Welcome back to Range Anxiety TV, and yep, I'm still here by myself. I think Paul's been incarcerated for crimes against hamsters. No, seriously, he's away working at the moment. Little Oscar is safe. Those that were listeners to the podcast will know all about him. However, today we're doing the anti-poll. We're doing something called a smart. Did you like that? Now, the smart car, it was a wonderful little thing, and I don't know how much many of you know about them, apart from they're quirky, and you've seen them on TV shows or run into like cement barriers at 200 kilometres an hour and not everyone dies. They're actually quite a strong little thing. It's like a really strong eggshell. Not a particularly handsome thing in my opinion. However, one of the PowerTech tuning collection, it's John's brother's car, and this is Smarty One. It's got the little 1 litre normally aspirated. I think it's a 3-banger engine. You'll see why I'm not that concerned about the engine in a minute. And it's got an Acro exhaust on it, so it sounds like a demented brush cutter. And it also has like a rear wing, because who doesn't need a rear wing and some downforce on a Smart? Now, right, and it's blue, of course, so you can tell it's one of ours. Blue, blue, blue. What you don't know, though, or may not know, is this was originally a sort of a joining of forces between Swatch, and they were like the Apple Watch of the early 80s or mid 80s or 90s or whenever. Remember Swatches? Any of you old enough to remember a Swatch? And Daimler-Benz, that's right, those people that employ Lewis Hamilton today, Mercedes. So this was half Mercedes, half Swatch, built pretty well because it's a Merc, and just a crazy little car. You know, it's a bit of a head scratcher or more of a nose scratcher as to why this thing even existed. But there is a really interesting backstory behind it that I guarantee you none of you will know, and I haven't even told Justin, our famous video photographer or whatever the word is. I'll ask ChatGPT what to call him later. He'll probably come back with do not compute. Warning.
You are correct. It does not compute.
Really interesting backstory here is that this car and this body was the second Tesla ever made. See, very few of you knew that. What happened is that back in 2008, the financial shit had hit the fan in the world, and we were starting off with what was called the GFC. Tesla were about 1 centimetre away from disappearing altogether up their own orifices and fully bankrupt. Musk was on his knees, penniless, had nothing left from PayPal, and decided to take a plane flight to Germany, go to Daimler-Benz's head office and say, hey, you've got an electric smart car you developed. They did. It had running gear in it from a pommy English company called Zytec, which is pretty much useless. They didn't really sell any of them. But Musk came along and said, we've developed this roadster based on the Lotus Elise. It's pretty kick-ass, does 0 to 100 in 3-point-something seconds. It was fast back then, the Roadster. What about we make you an electric Smart that's cool and fast? And Daimler-Benz said, all right, we'll give you 50 million. 50 million back then. We'll give you 50 million, but you've got like 2 weeks. Just a concept. So that's it. Musk gets back on the plane. It might have been 2 weeks or a month. The details are sketchy. I've heard him talk in an interview about it, but he changes sometimes what he says as well. Jumps back on a plane, back to Silicon Valley. They had just a little, like a warehouse, not much bigger than this shop back then, Tesla. Said, right, let's go and get a Smart and make it electric. Problem being was that Smarts weren't sold in the US, and Daimler didn't give him a car. So $20,000 cash in hand, an employee's hand, fly to Mexico, where they're on sale, buy the car, 20 grand, and drive it flat out back to the San Francisco Bay Area again to start working on it. Now, Daimler didn't believe this was possible. However, they were interested in electrification, so when the 2 weeks or a month or whatever it was up, a group of execs jumped on the plane, the big kerosene budgie, flew over to San Francisco and said, how are you going with this concept? And they said, oh yeah, cool, cool. And so Musk gave them this big PowerPoint presentation. Here's the way we're going to do the driveline. Here's the way we're going to make a new battery pack out of the Roadster batteries and everything else. And apparently the execs nearly fell asleep. They just thought it was boring. stupid, and they just wanted to get out on the town. He'd lost them. He'd lost them fully at this point. But then he said, and this is the power of Elon, come out into the car park and have a drive of one. And they were going, nah, no way. And there in the car park was one of these, just like this, fitted with the Roadster motor, power unit, a special battery pack, generating about 400 horsepower, they say. So yeah, pretty grunty. And if you planted the throttle, it would wheel stand. It was actually a super fast car, and the Daimler-Benz execs were absolutely blown away by this. Like, how can you do this in such a short period of time? Well, I imagine they got in there with air saws and made things work. Interior looked exactly the same as the interior in this one, and I'll get Justin to show you what it looks like. Nothing looked different about the car except it was super fast and electric, and made the existing Smart electric, the Zytec powered thing, look like junk. So a little love affair begun between Daimler-Benz and Tesla. And if you've been in an up to a 2020 model, Model S or Model X, you'll still see it has Mercedes stalks and Mercedes window switches and stuff in it. They had a little technology partnership going for a little bit. However, it didn't end well. And nobody, apart from Musk, Strobel, and the Daimler execs, fully understand why, but there were some reasons for this, I believe, that haven't been covered. This car, electric, was so darn good and so much better than anything else out there that the Daimler-Benz people are basically panicked. They panicked. They never put any of these into production. They test drove one. They analysed one. The unions clamped down on them. The German government clamped down on them. They didn't want this electric thing to start. Now, this is in 2008, right? Not 2008, 2008. It's in 2008, 2009, and it was a real big time for the world. This is the same time that GM was killing off the EV1, which was a fantastic electric car. This is where oil companies, governments just clamped down and said, get rid of this electric rubbish now. Musk walked away with his 50 million and ultimately turned that into nearly $1 trillion. And companies like GM and Daimler-Benz are on their knees losing money faster than it can be printed. Had they taken the leap of faith back then, Tesla would have been swallowed up and gone, you know, with some great engineering ideas. Mercedes would be leading the electrification race. GM would be leading the electrification race. As it stands, they're on their knees because they sat there not knowing what they're doing for 10 years and gave another company a decade's head start. It will go down in history of one of the most stupid things that industry has ever done. And the automotive industry, of course, but so you know, I'm involved in the automotive industry, has to cap that off as being the most stupid of them all. So that's the interesting backstory of the Smart. Forget about Hayabusa conversions. People have done that with the big Suzuki 4-cylinder banger motor in them. Sound cool, you know, go cool. Not particularly easy thing to do though. You can buy kits that have about a quarter of the parts you need to do the conversion. It'd be just as easy to buy a wrecked Model 3, I believe, take the cells out of the battery pack, build a cell that's smaller, get it under the floor or in the front and put the rear drive unit in it. That would be with an aftermarket controller, which companies like Nginx now make in Canada for them. You could build yourself an original cool Smart for 2 that would blow the doors off most any Hayabusa conversion, you know, but of course, where's the soul? You know, the smelly, noisy, leaky bit of it. Cool, I'm sure we can engineer that in with a bit of a, you know, microphone or a speaker system or something. But that's the backstory of the Smart. It's an interesting story. I don't expect this video to go viral amongst car nuts, but for those of you with an eye on history and automotive history and, you know, that dates back to mass manufacturing in the Model T and Henry Ford and all that sort of stuff, you should really appreciate this because it's a little known story. And that's what we're here to do at Range Anxiety, tell some good stories. So I hope you like this one. Here we are in the interior of the Smart, like I was promising. And you can see there's, as a conversion base, I'm just looking at it, how you would do this. There's a lot of really weird stuff in here in terms of the packaging that would make the conversion not so easy. You've got to look at the car as now being 2 blocks. Get rid of all of this. The gearbox in these was never great. It was like a robotized manual, which made it a bit of a stuffy thing to use, like clunk, 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 and that's flat out. Think Lamborghini Aventador, and you've got the same sort of gearbox in this, so maybe that's a reason, to lap one of these things up. So we'd throw all of that in the bin, straight up, bin. So we have a little bit more room here, and maybe just use the stick and the contacts as a drive select for the controller module to be forwards, reverse. So that'd be cool. That'd be all right. Brakes in these things feel a bit funny anyway, so we might upgrade the brakes and the pads, but we would inbuild a lot of regeneration braking into the power unit itself. So even with standard size brakes, we could have almost double the braking power that a Smart normally has just via the regen. And you need to program that carefully, being such a light car, that when you stepped off the throttle, it just doesn't lock the rears and flick you into the wall. So it needs some sort of traction-based system on that, like most EVs have anyway. Drive unit goes in the back, so that would take up the entire underfloor at the back area, and I reckon you could get a Model 3 drive unit in there with like Paul Howson sized axles, around the 5 centimetre mark. It'd be tricky to do, but it could be done. Packaging the battery, well, that would have to all go in the snoot. You wouldn't get a lot of battery into this sucker by the looks of it. Toss that hideous petrol banger out. I mean, it's not a great engine. It's probably the weakest part of this car is the engine. The rest of it's quite, chic in some ways. Throw that away, and I reckon you'd only maybe get 20 to 25 kilowatt hours of packs in there. So you'd have to divvy up a Model 3 cell, which will give you half the size battery of a standard Model 3. So you've got about 200 kilos up front. So it will be a bit heavier. The drive unit at the back will be about 70 or 80 kilos. So we've got like mid 300s of wiring and drive unit and battery. So it will be a bit heavier, but it will stand even with the weight of the battery in the front. And that's what you've got to have. So add maybe another 10 kilos for wheelie bars. I'm not joking. You'll need them. And maybe a little front lip to keep the nose pinned at speed. But I reckon it'd be a pretty cool thing to do. And it's giving me some ideas. You know what? Once we've finished our other EV project out there that we're working on at the moment, I will endeavour to have a look into one of these. I reckon this would actually be pretty cool. So PowerTech team, roll your sleeves up. You're going to have to do some work and make one of these smart cars great again. Thanks.